Closing the door. Okay, welcome everybody. We have about 57 of you here so far. We're expecting 112, I think, at last count. So I'm going to give it just a minute. I don't want to delay too long because I know there's probably lots and lots of questions. So I'm Terry Ball, and I'm the grants manager at Californians for the Arts. So as everybody is doing, if you can all go ahead and log in, I'm going to give it to 11:03, and then we'll get started. For those of you that are here, if you're having any trouble with hearing me at this point, please go ahead and put a note in the chat so I know and we can deal with that. Hi, Kim. It's nice to see some names that I recognize. We've all played this grant game a time or two at this point. Okay, we seem to have sort of topped off, and I don't want to punish those of you who are on time. All right, here, Eddie, if you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide. I'm going to start with the obligatory reminding you of who we are. Good morning. We're here to talk about the round 2 of the California Venues Grant. This is being presented by Californians for the Arts. We are one of the partners for the administration of this grant and the main technical partner. NEVA California is one of our other partners. We'll be doing some webinars next week and then into January with them. Californians for the Arts and Californians Arts Advocates are 2 organizations that work in tandem together. One is our advocacy arm, Californians for the Arts, and then Californians Arts Advocates is the lobbying arm. These 2 organizations were very involved in both making this program possible and also in the cleanup legislation that was done last year to make it actually functioning. because as many of you may know, when this program first opened last December, there were a lot of issues. And it was the advocacy of Californians for the Arts, Californians Arts Advocates, NEVA California, and so many members of you helping to contact your representatives to say, the programs are not working, we need to get it cleaned up and fixed, and wonderfully, it has been. And we were able to ultimately fund many people in the first round, and we're hoping to fund more in this round. Okay, Eddie, you can move along to the next. This is, again, as I was just talking about, the only way we make changes if we bring all of our voices together. So next. Plan for the webinar. The one thing I am going to do before we move on is I'm going to pop a few links into the chat. The first is for the venues grant program itself. The second is for Californians for the Arts. That's a page on our website. We have a page specifically about this grant program, and as updates happen, and once we process the recording of this webinar, those things will all be posted on the venues program page within the Californians for the Arts website. The final link there is, if you are grateful and happy that these services are being provided, you too can be a member of Californians for the Arts and also Californians Arts Advocates, and help us provide free services and also advocate for these kinds of programs. I come originally from the not-for-profit world, but one of the things that I like, and before I became more involved in Californians for the Arts, I run a theater down in Santa Barbara, and I thought Californians for the Arts really only served the nonprofit sector. And what I have come to learn is that is not the case, that these two organizations are very vocal, strong advocates for the entire creative cultural sector. They are out there advocating and working as hard for a program like this that serves all the for-profit and the not-for-profit, but also is working very strongly to the entire creative culture right now, creative economy is suffering. We are coming back much slower, as you all know. And so the advocacy of an organization like this that is there to speak for us in tandem with NEVA California, which is another advocacy organization, as you know. So, okay, enough commercials. Let's move on to the meat. The plan for the webinar is I want to move through the presentation as quickly as possible, and then have time to open up for your questions. I'm going to cover some big misconceptions at the front and try and answer those, and then we'll move through the program. I'm on my own today, so I won't be answering questions in the Q&A during the session, but that's where we'll go to afterwards, as well as new questions. And then at the end of the webinar, I will go through and answer every question in the Q&A, whether we got to it or not, and you will get an email follow-up after this with a link to the recording and also a link to that full Q&A. And we will also numerous times put my email information into the chat. So anytime during the process that you have questions, problems, concerns, my email is there. No problem, Dwayne. There's also a phone number. I will tell you, it is much easier for me to respond to emails than it is to phone, and that in part is because you can do emails while you're doing lots of other things, and people don't know you're multitasking. Also, I can reply to emails at 2 o'clock in the morning, and phone calls are usually not welcome at that time. Seriously, though, one of the great things about replying an email is you then have a written reference of the information I'm sending to you. And a lot of times the information with these grants is a little dense. So if I email it to you, then you don't have to take notes while we're talking on the phone or something. All right. As I put into the chat, The link is there. A couple of important things before we get started. The most important one is, this is round 2 of the California Venues Grant. I know there have been a lot of grant relief programs administered by Cal OSBA and worked on by Lindustry, so it gets a little confusing. But this is round 2 of the California Venues, and if you applied in the first round, you are not eligible to apply in the second round. And that includes if you applied and got declined, or your application hasn't been resolved yet. In any of those cases, you don't want to apply again. We want to look at your original application and see how we can get that resolved. When the program first opened, as I said, there were some issues. And then in June of this year, some resolutions and some changes to the eligibility were made. But the first thing that Lindustry did before reopening the program is try to work through all of the existing applications. So even applications that had been denied based on the old eligibility should have been re-examined with the new parameters. So if your application was declined and you think it would qualify now with the new eligibility, or if you just never heard back, you applied, but you never got awarded and you don't know, then send me an email and let's find out what happened with your old application, because those are still being cleaned up and granted. And if yours hasn't, if you were declined, and you think you're eligible, we can get a reconsideration to make sure it's looked at with the new eligibility. If you just go ahead and reapply, you will get auto declined because your EIN number is already in the system. And then it will be harder to sort out. So if you already applied once, or you think you may have applied once, shoot me an email and let's sort that out. Let's see, is there anything else juicy here? The other thing, yes, this is very important. The application portal is going to open next Monday on December 19th, and it's not going to close until January 31st. This grant is not reviewed on a first come, first served basis. This grant is reviewed based on your percentage of loss. There is no difference if you apply on day 1 or if you apply on January 31st. The application review will not start until after January 31st. Do not feel like you should rush to get your application in. Okay, now we can jump on. Okay, rough overview. This program is available to both for-profit and nonprofit organizations that fit the criteria we're going to talk about. The grants awarded are based on your gross earned revenue in California for the 2019 tax year. So if you're a for-profit, that's fairly straightforward. If you're a not-for-profit, remember it's your earned income, not your contributed income, is what your grant award will be based on. And you're going to be, Kim will put the email, I'll put it in again right now. It also will be on a slide at the end of the presentation. Sorry, I have to quit looking at the Q&A, at the chat. If you're not on a calendar, if your fiscal year and calendar year don't match, you want to go by the calendar year, even if, the calendar year. Yes, I'm sorry, too many grant programs. Because this grant program is about COVID relief, and therefore they're looking at how your income was impacted during COVID. That's why if you have a fiscal year, you want to stick still with the numbers of the calendar year when you are providing your financials. As I said, the prioritization is based on the percentage of loss. Again, because this is about COVID, it's not full year 2019 compared to full year 2020. It's Q2 through Q4 in 2019 compared to Q2 through Q4 in 2020. So we take out that first quarter before COVID started, and we take that out again in January in case your business is seasonal or something, just to try to keep everybody on the same footing. Another common misconception, because it's called the California Venues Grant, is that only venues are eligible. That is not accurate. There's going to be a lot of criteria we're going to go through, but if you are a live event that performs at an eligible venue, and we're going to talk through the criteria, but this is for both live events and also the venues where they happen. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next. Okay, so an eligible venue. I'm not going to read most of these slides. You will be sent this deck, and it drives me crazy when people read me slides. So I will not, but again, you're going to get the deck. It's going to be on the website. You don't have to write all of this down. These are the criteria for an eligible venue. You have to have a defined performance space and audience space. You have to have mixing equipment, a public address system, and a lighting rig. You have to employ one or more people carrying out at least two of these different roles. So if you're a small operation and you have the same person that does a whole lot of this, that's fine. You just have to be able to show that you use these functions. Sound engineer, a booker, a promoter, a stage manager, security personnel, and a box office manager. And that is one of the 3 highest revenue grossing entities, locations, or franchises associated with the applicant. This is one of the criteria that changed in the eligibility. And we are right now waiting for an interpretation of what this means. Our hope is that what this means is for those in the for-profit world, you know that with SFOG, for example, you were able to apply for multiple entities if you owned more than one different entity that filed its own separate taxes. What we're hoping is that in this round, you would actually be able to apply for 3 instead of 1. But because the way this was written in the legislation, 2 is one of the 3 highest revenue grossing entities. There's some confusion right now about the interpretation of that. A little Civics 101, there is a line that happens between when we as advocates fight for something and campaign for something, and then it turns into a law, and then the lawyers get to look at what that law really means. So I'm waiting for a final clarification on that point. If this impacts you, if you are someone that owns more than one business, if you applied in the first round, you want to apply for the other 2, shoot me an email and let's talk about those on a case-by-case basis. And I'll also then, like I said, we will publicize as soon as we have a clarification on this. And for a venue owned or operated by a nonprofit entity that produces free events, the events are that your staff are actual employees. And this you'll understand more why that's a clarification, because that you charge tickets is one of the qualifications that's going to come up. Okay, so that's what you have to be for your venue to be eligible. Next. Now, these are the things that you have to be for your event itself. So you can be the theater, and as long as you meet those criteria and the events that happen in your theater meet the criteria, then you can apply. Or you can be the dance group, the orchestra, whatever, and apply. But you have to then perform in an eligible venue. These get a little dense and confusing, these criteria, because the way they've written them, You could be this, but you have to have these various components. So I'm going to go through this, but don't be concerned if you get confused. Shoot me an email and we'll sort out, for your organization. All right. For those of you who were in round one of this, you know that there was a very short list of NAICS codes and NTE codes. One of the ways that they are determining eligibility, it is not the sole way, but one of the eligibility factors is that your NTE code, which shows up on your taxes, and or for not-for-profits, many not-for-profits don't have a NAICS code listed on their 990. And so there is a parallel code called an NTE code. I'm not going to go through all of these. Look at the list. You can look them up on the websites also. There was confusion in the last round because there was communication about pick the NAICS code that you fall under. The reality is the way that they determine what your NAICS code, verify what your NAICS code is they look at your 2019 and or your 2020 taxes. Those will have for for-profits, for all for-profits, you will have a NAICS code listed on your taxes. If you look at your taxes and think that NAICS code doesn't represent me, then now is the time to talk to your accountant and legal counsel about making sure you have the NAICS code on your taxes that accurately represents you. And if you need to make corrections to that. We are not looking at 21, 22 taxes. We are specifically looking at your 2019 and 2020 tax forms. And it doesn't matter if you think you fall into or you could be covered by one of the listed NAICS codes here. The only way the NAICS code is verified is by what is on the taxes that you filed in 2019 and 2020. Next. So as I said, for not-for-profits, your 990 does not require you to list this. And so there's a website that lists public information about not-for-profits called GuideStar. And there you will see an NTE code that the IRS has assigned to you based on your activities. Again, go there, check at it, look at it. If it does not accurately represent what your company does, then consult with your organization and see if, what action you might need to take. If you have specific questions on that, email me. These are much longer lists than they were before. The other thing to remember is this is not an all or nothing. You have to have a NAICS code or an NTT that qualifies. But the mere fact that you are one of these does not qualify you. For example, you see here full service restaurants. Every full service restaurant is not eligible for this grant. The only full service restaurants that are eligible are ones that can also meet the other criteria. So in your full service restaurant and or drinking place, you have to have a defined audience space and a defined performance space. And you have to still employ those different staff that we talked about. Okay, move on. All right, so the definitions of an eligible independent live event. And again, this is dense language, so I'm going to summarize it for you. And then if you have specific questions, because most of them you have to be this and this. But the basics are your principal activity that you organize, promote, produce, manage, or host live events. And there's sort of a list there. The interesting addition in this program from the beginning is that sporting events, as long as they meet all those other criteria, sporting events are also eligible. The two big things that almost always are the case is you have to charge in some fashion for admission. So if you're playing softball in the field with your buddies, you're not qualified. You have to charge admission, and that could be a cover, but you have to have an admission charge. And the fact that I'm coming to the restaurant to eat is not the admission charge. So it would have to be that there's a ticketed event that takes place in a restaurant or club. So number one, charge admission. Number two, your performers have to be paid. The one exception to the charge admission, as I mentioned before, and why they put this under venues and not under event, is if you are a nonprofit, you can do free events as long as the staff is paid. The other important thing is at least 70% of the earned revenue has to come from ticket charges, rental fees, production costs, the sale of events, event-related beverages, food, or merchandise. So it can't be that you run a restaurant and one time a year you have a ticketed event, but 90% of the revenue for your restaurant comes from your regular restaurant operation. This has to be a regular part of your ongoing business. Performers can be straight paid, or as it says here, performers are paid in an amount that is based on a percentage of sales, a guarantee in writing, or standard contract, or another mutually beneficial formal arrangement. One of the categories that is new this time around is movie theaters and drive-ins. So that is a whole new category. Okay, let's move on. The ineligible businesses, again, there's a lot of detail in here. I'm not going to go through it, but the big important one, a couple of them, is number one, you have to generate at least 70% of your gross earned revenue in California. So if your main business is in Texas and you do a little business here, you will not qualify. The other thing, and this is a big change from when this program opened, is you have to demonstrate a percentage decrease in gross earned revenue of at least 30%. It used to be at least 70%, but now you have to have at least a 30% decrease when looking at Q2, Q3, and Q4 of 2019 compared to Q2, Q3, and Q4 in 2020. So 2020, your gross earned revenue in those quarters can only be 30% of what it was in 2019. There's a lot of, read all the rest of these eligible business ones, but I don't want to go over them right now. Let's go. Next. That's more detail. Let's keep going. The eligible use of the funds. Again, look over this in detail. It's fairly broad, but it is related to the COVID-19 losses. Remember, it will go retroactively. So if you have expenses from COVID losses that you have not already attributed to a government relief program, then you can use those losses here. If you have expenses that you already used and were taken care of under SFOG or under the California Relief Act, you can't use those expenses again. But you can, it doesn't have to be a COVID related expense that you are experiencing right now. It can be retroactive. It just can't also have been used to cover a different grant program. Next. Required documents. Before we go into the required documents, there's two things I forgot to say earlier. Number one, the grant amount will be 20% of your 2019 gross earned revenue. So for not-for-profits, it's not your total revenue, it's your gross earned revenue. If you received a California relief grant, which is the one that started at the very beginning of 2021, there were a number of rounds of it. If you received one of those grants, the amount of that grant will be deducted from the amount of this grant that you received. So if you got a $5,000 California relief grant, and the total based on your gross earned revenue in 2019, your total venues grant maybe comes out to $32,000. What you would actually receive is $27,000, because that $5,000 that you already got will be taken out. All right, the required documents. These are, again, fairly straightforward. All of these will be PDF submissions. The first one, the application certification, this is on the venue's website. You will download it earlier, you sign it, and then you're going to scan it, turn it into a PDF, and you'll upload it during the application process. The one other thing that tends to confuse people is the interim financial statements. What that is a profit and loss statement for Q2 through Q4 of 2019, and the same for 2020. During the first application process, and I assume this will be the case this time, they have not clarified this. What they actually want is for you in your QuickBooks or wherever your accountant or you do your books, run a Q2 2019 profit and loss statement. Run one for Q3, one run for Q4. Do the same thing for 2020. And then in one PDF, put those all together. But they don't want you to run a Q2 through Q4 profit and loss. They want to be able to look at each individual quarter. The other thing that you have to do as part of this grant is prove that you were an operating business in the state of California prior to June 1 of 2019. Don't ask me why that date is the case, but it's written in the legislation, so just know. Unfortunately, if you started after June 1 of 2019, you will not be eligible for the grant. And so then they're going to want, there's paperwork that will be asked for to prove that. But you guys can read those, so on we go. The application certification, as I said, that is a form that is on the website. You will go there, you will download it, you will fill it out. There is one specific to nonprofits and one specific to for-profits. So make sure you download the correct one. Next. That's just how you complete this. And you can do it electronically and sign it, or you can print it out, sign it, and scan it. Next. Again, next. These are just pictures that they've given you in case you don't know what some of these documents are. So let's keep moving. Next. During the process, you will have to prove who you are. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but these are just examples of, you're going to need your passport and or your driver's license. Next. Again, these are just copies of the documents that are listed. You will not need all of the, like there's a category of prove that you're an organization that was established before June 1st. You don't need everything there. You'll just need either your articles of incorporation or, you know, one of the other items in the list. For the not-for-profit, you're going to need your tax letter. Okay. Again, we talked about the fact that you have to know your NAICS code. I find this language a little deceiving, or not deceiving, because that's the wrong word, confusing, because you don't want to go and look on the NAICS website and look up and see what you think your NAICS code should be. What you want to do is look at your 2019 and 2020 taxes and see what your NAICS code is. And if you feel it doesn't represent you, go and deal with, you know, talk to your accountant about things that you can do. But it's not a matter of go on the NAICS website and look up what you think you fall under, and then you'll be able to say, well, see, I fit these criteria. That's not how this works. Okay, moving on. While we're going Chloe, no, this program is not open to fiscally sponsored organizations unless you meet the criteria as a for-profit. Okay, next. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Use a valid email address. And what this means is, for some reason, their system does not like info@ emails. So even if you have to create a new one, don't use info@. And make sure, it's very, very important that the email address you give them is an email address you have active contact to watch, because this is where a tremendous amount of the communication will come to about the grant. Next. You know, there are a number of things said here about the documents. The basic thing is, whoever is looking at this document has the future of your grant in their hands. Make it as easy for them as possible. Do not take a picture that is going to come out, you know, an inch square of the document on your phone and then upload it. You want to make the life as easy as possible for those who are reviewing these documents. They should be legible, they should be clean, they should be straight, etc. Okay, next. The fact that I'm skipping over these pages does not mean you shouldn't go back and read them. Okay, this is one of the more confusing parts of this grant. And one of the things we have to remember is this is a statewide grant being used, and taxpayer dollars are being used to pay for it. Therefore, one of the big mandates that the state has is to make sure fraud does not occur. As much as we would all like to say, everyone will be honest and no one would possibly commit fraud to state funds, we all know that's not the world in which we live. So the Cal OSBA and Lindustry, who run this grant, have to take every precaution they possibly can to make sure not only that the people who apply are eligible, but also that the people who apply are actual people and not, you know, one of these grant applying scams where people are just applying over and over. So they are going to take steps to verify who you are when you are submitting the grant. I know it feels intrusive. I know we all have tremendous concern about identity theft, but this is one of the places where our individual concern and the state concerns kind of have to overlap, and we have to find an overlap place where we can all be comfortable. During the process, you will be asked to complete what is called a persona identity check. This is a third-party business that is going to confirm your identity. You're going to both upload a picture of the ID, and then later, and then as part of that process also, you're literally going to, either with your camera screen or with your screen on your phone, your camera on your phone, look and have it, it's going to record your face, and it's going to match, is the face I'm seeing in front of the camera the same face that was submitted with the ID. So again, when you give them the photo copy of your ID, you want it to be clear and legible. Read all of these details, but yes, you absolutely have to do persona. There's always people who are like, I don't want to do this. This freaks me out. If you want to apply for the grant, the signer on the grant has to complete the process. Next, we're going to be a whole, so this is going to take you, sort of shows you screen by screen the persona process. So look at this, but we're not going to go through it right now. Keep going. This is more, keep going. Okay, there are some very specific tips that Lindustry puts out about using their interface. Read them, follow them. Many people that have technical problems, the reason they do is because they are not in Google Chrome. They haven't cleared their cache. They didn't use incognito mode. The next few pages in this presentation that we're going to move through tell you how to do all of these things. Do them. Okay, next. Keep going. So this is where they take it. They've given you great instructions on how to do this stuff. So keep going. Yep, keep going. Okay, so what's going to happen from December 19th to January 31st, everybody's going to put in their grants. There is some preliminary checking that the system automatically does. Did you upload everything we asked for? That sort of thing. But the actual review of the grants will not start until after January 31st, because since they're using the amount of loss to prioritize the grant, you can't prioritize them until we have them all. So when you apply late December, don't be concerned that in the middle of January you haven't heard anything. Nothing will be communicated out about this grant until mid to late February at the earliest, other than, you know, an automatic reply of, hey, we got your stuff, or there are certain things that will trip an automatic decline when you apply. If your EIN number that is entered has already been entered, if, you know, there's some other technical things. So if you get an immediate reply, that means that you have been auto declined. If you don't understand why, shoot me an email. Next. Oh, so these are just some tips. One is go through these guidelines page by page, educate yourself so you don't have any surprises. One piece of the puzzle that we do not have yet from Lindustry is sometimes with these grant programs, before the application portal opens, they will put out a guide that takes you page by page through the application itself. You can't like enter anything yet, but it will just show you what each page is. So if you have questions beforehand, you can ask. They have not published that yet. So if that comes out, we'll let everybody know. The advantage of the program this time is it's not a first come, first serve. So there isn't the anxiety of, oh my gosh, I have to get this in the first hour or I won't get funded. Sometimes there are kinks in the language. Please remember, this is a portal that is set up for everyone. And in a program that caters to both for-profits and not-for-profits, that means there's going to be strangenesses. For the not-for-profits, they're going to talk about an owner. It should be your board president or one of the officers on your board. So don't let those kinds of language things confuse you. There's also a mistake in, you've caught me copying and pasting here. This page itself that talks about fiscal sponsors is wrong. There are no fiscally sponsored organizations are not eligible for this grant. That is a carryover from another one. So pay no attention. All right. The other piece of the puzzle normally with one of these grants is that you have to do a bank verification. The first time they did the Cal Venues program, that verification happened after the fact. You put your application in, and then in the next day or two, you'd get an email saying we want to verify your bank. The next grant program that they put out, that verification actually happened as part of the application process. We're waiting for clarification as to where it will be this time. Again, this is a process that makes people crazy because of the fear of identity theft. It is a very intrusive process. What they are going to do is ask for your banking information for your organization, and down to login information, because what they do is they use this two ways. Number one, this is how the money is issued at the end. They do not cut checks. Everything is done as a bank transfer. But the other thing they use the bank information for is, again, fraud prevention. They need to verify that you're a functioning business. So they do checks to make sure that that's actually happening. It's a system called Plaid. It, again, is a third party. If you have concerns about that program, that portion of the application, email me because I want to get to questions. The other really important thing, when you are filling out this application, both for-profits and not-for-profits, they're going to want an owner. They're going to want a signer. And for not-for-profits and also for for-profits, this has to be somebody listed on your statement of information with the state as an officer of your organization. Now, the difficulty here is in many organizations, both for-profit and not-for-profit, who the owner is and who a signer is not necessarily the person who has the day-to-day information about the business who would normally be filling out this application. Particularly, in a larger, smaller organization, it may all be the same person, but in larger ones, it's less likely so. When you set this up, they're going to ask for an email and a cell phone, and that has to be a way that they can access the actual signer. However, if the signer is someone who is not involved in the day-to-day operation of the business and is not someone who's going to check their emails, you need to make sure that email is going to someone who will check it. Also the phone. There will be a point in the process that they want to call the phone and talk directly to the signer, the owner, the officer. But just make sure when you're filling in the information that the cell phone and email that you enter are specific, are ones that are going to be monitored. Okay, next. So this is the call center for Lindustry. Those are the hours it's open. You will get a copy of this slide. As with any call center, they are covering a lot of programs, and there are a lot of intricacies to this program. And not every single call center person, unfortunately, is completely up on every single detail. If you are concerned, confused by information you are getting from the call center, you can do two things. One, email me. Two, you can tell the call center that you would like to be escalated. Because there are other people who have much more specific information and training about the program. But at any point in time, I can't say frequently enough, if you have a question, if you are concerned, if you have a problem, email me. And because we have ways to also put in escalations, and I can sometimes sort things out. Do not panic if you are told something by the call center that makes no sense, or that and I'm not saying that everything they say to you will be wrong, but before you panic about bad information from the call center, check it with me. Okay, I think there's one more slide that just gives the contact information again. There you go. All right, so I'm going to first go over to the Q&A, and then we'll blast quickly through. Have the requirements leaden some, or are they still the same? Kim, I know the first program that you applied to was actually, or I know that you applied to the nonprofit performing arts organization. That is a different grant than this one. So the only degree to which the requirements have lessened is there is a longer list now of NAICS codes and NTE codes. And the threshold of loss is you now only have to have a 30% loss instead of a 70%. You have more, you got my email, shoot me if you have more specific. Hi, Tara, emailed you. Can we apply for California Venues Grant Program round 2 while our California, yes, the NPPA program and the Cal Venue program are completely separate. If you've received or are in the process of a nonprofit performing arts grant, then you can still apply for Cal Venues. If you applied for the first round of Cal Venues, you cannot apply for the second round. You cannot apply with a fiscal sponsor. However, if you are a operational business, a for-profit business, then you can. But no, this program accepts for-profit, commercial businesses, not-for-profit businesses, but it does not take fiscally sponsored projects. Is the requirement that we be an venue or an independent live event, or a venue and an independent? It is not that you are both. Say, for example, I am Susie Q's dance company. And as Susie Q's dance company, I perform at Billy Joe's Theater, and Billy Joe's Theater matches all of the requirements. They have a separate space, they employ all of those things, but I don't own my own space, but that's where I perform. Then as long as you, as your business, pay your performers, charge for your events, etc., and you're performing in a venue, then you qualify. You do not have to be the owner of the venue. By the same token, if you are a venue that is a rental venue, so organizations rent you, you don't necessarily produce the events. If your venue meets the eligibility requirements and the majority of your events meet the eligibility requirements, in other words, they have tickets charged, the performers are paid, then yes, you should qualify. The lawyers would want me to say, obviously, I can't guarantee anybody's eligibility. What I can tell you is, the preponderance. So just because I say, yes, you can qualify, doesn't mean you will, because there may be other requirements. You have to be in good standing with the Secretary of State. If you're a not-for-profit, all of your not-for-profit statuses have to be in good standing. Whose passport/driver is needed for an organization? CFO, Grants Director. If you are a nonprofit, it has to be someone who is on your statement of information as an officer. It cannot be someone who's just there. Statements of information for everyone, both for-profit and non. You have officers listed, and then there's also someone who is listed as accepting service. It can't just be the person who is accepting service. It has to be a excuse me. It has to be a signer, and the same is true for a for-profit business. It can't be like your venue manager. It has to be someone who is on the statement of information as an officer of the company or corporation. Is there a date range for the expenses incurred? No, there is no date timeline for this, like there was with SFOG and there have been with some others. It does have to be COVID related, but there is not a specific date when the expenses have to have happened. And there is not a specific timeline for when you have to expend the funds. One other thing along those lines that is a little unusual, if you go through and your grant is funded, the last step will be they will send you a grant agreement by DocuSign. Most of us are used to with a DocuSign, after we sign, you get emailed a copy of the agreement you just signed. In this case, for some reason, that does not happen. They say that you are able to download the agreement through the grants portal. That does not always work. My recommendation is, if you want a copy of what you're signing in the agreement, when it comes to you as a DocuSign, print it before you sign it and submit it. Or create a PDF or whatever, because they will not automatically send you one. You can request one after the fact, but you will not automatically get a copy of the grant agreement. Can an individual performing artist apply? Only if you meet the basic business qualifications. Are you registered? Or do you function as a business, as opposed to I'm an actor or I'm a singer? If you are incorporated as a business, even a sole proprietor, then yes. But if you just are an actor that usually is in other people's productions, or a singer that jobs out, then no. But if you have any questions, email me. I applied for CAPA and received. Are we eligible to apply for this? I'm not sure which grant you're referring to, Stephanie, as CAPA. Shoot me an email with the full name of the program. I know the California Nonprofit Performing Arts. I don't know if this is one of the relief grants. So shoot me an email or put in a follow-up question. Can a presenting nonprofit organization that does not have a venue of its own qualify for this grant? Yes, that would not be a disqualifying factor. If you applied for the SVG, but got all the way to the end of the choices, was not selected, can you reapply for this round? If you applied for, there is no one from the venues grant that simply got not selected because the funds run out or something. The venue grants, everyone that applied in round one either got denied or got funded or has not yet been resolved. They didn't run out of funds. That's not why there's a round two. If what you're talking about is one of the relief grants, then that's a separate question. But no, if you applied for the California Venues Grant, the application portal was last fall from most of, part of October and November, closed December 12th, or 7th. If that's the program that you talked about, no. And if you don't know what the resolution was of your grant, email me and let's look it up. I'm going to try very quickly to go backwards through the chat and see if there are any more things over here. Can a specific play production or schedule for 20? This is not a project specific grant. So no, an organization presenting a play, sorry. If you were in existence in June 1 of 2019, and if you have revenue from 2019 and 2020, then you could apply for the grant. But this is not a project specific grant. This is an organizational grant. This is COVID relief. I don't want to select all. I want you to scroll up. Okay, you're not going to. Here we go. Do we have to have paid employees? You do not have to have paid employees. You do have to have paid artists. Because this is talking about 2019, you have to prove that in 2019, the productions you were having, you had paid performers. This is not an AB5 situation. So you don't have to worry about whether you're paying your performers through as independent contractors or as employees. That's a whole other can of worms with different parts of the government. You do, however, have to have paid performers. And why won't this scroll up? Okay. Let's see if I can make this work. Okay, let's try going all the way to the top then. Okay, these are all of our introductions. Can they be paid filmmakers, screening their films with us and not performers? This is a very interesting question. Email me, Adam. The reason this is interesting is if this was round one, I would say to you no, that it has to be live performers. The two of the NAICS codes that were added for this round are movies and movie theaters. And the interpretation from the state is that movies can qualify because the paid performers involved are the actors that are in the films. So let me see what we're going to do. I mean, so I know if you were a venue showing the movies, then I would say to you, yes, if you meet the other qualifiers, you can. But in terms of if you are the filmmaker, it seems to me like, yes, you should be able to. But as I say, this is a new area. So send me an email, Adam, and let's discuss this because that's one of the answers. One of the things about these grants that I didn't cover at the beginning is the way this works is, unlike, like, say, the California Arts Council for those of you in the not-for-profit world, a foundation, an arts organization decides they want to give away money. That's not how this works. The way this works is the legislature passes a law. They then say, this is the government agency, in this case, Cal OSBA, who's going to be in charge of administering it. Cal OSBA looks at the legislation and says, okay, this is the interpretation of the law as the legislators wrote it. And then Cal OSBA contracts with a business, an organization, in this case, Lendistry, to actually administer the grant. So there are many different levels. And one of the big lessons of legislation is legislation is advocated for, it passes, and then you have to wait for the lawyers to tell you what it really means. So there are areas in this, particularly the brand new stuff, that we are still waiting for what that interpretation will be. So let's go back up. We recently changed from profit to nonprofit. Are we still qualified? Natalie, email me. It will, because yours case is a little strange. For the most part, yes, you can, because either a for-profit or a not-for-profit in this case counts. You will be, for the most part, determined based on your 2019 existence, if that makes sense. We are a rental venue. We also lost the ability to host our Victorian tea and crab feed. I really can't, as a rental venue, yes, you can certainly apply. I'm not sure what your question is. So Dwayne, if you could send me a more detailed question, we can talk offline. One of the important things that I will tell you is, if you are not sure, err on the side of applying. Now, the only place that is not the case is if you're not sure if you were in round one. Because if you're in round one and you apply again, you're going to get auto declined, and it may also mess up your round one. So in that case, don't err on the side of applying. If you have a question about, well, I think I'm eligible, but I'm not 100% sure, then go ahead and apply. Don't lie. Don't present false information. But there's nothing wrong with applying when you aren't really sure of the interpretation, because there's a lot of interesting little pieces to the eligibility. If you apply and there are questions, we can deal with that. If you wait until after January, once the application portal closes January 31st, you can't apply anymore. And they don't reopen, and they will not accept. So if you think, I may be due, but I'm not really sure, be honest, give all the honest information, and then we can deal with the application once it's in. If you come to me on February 15th and say, you know, I wasn't sure, so I didn't apply, you're out of luck. So there's that. All right, let's move up. I'm sorry, my computer is being stupid. Thank you for the moment. I'm with City of Angels. We were denied because of our NTE code. Jacqueline, email me offline, because you don't want to apply again. We want to look at your existing. We received SBA Lendistry grants. Can we find out if our EIN is disqualified by email? Shoot me an email, Dwayne. University presenters, this is an unfortunate and difficult situation, and you're probably not going to like my answer. The reality is, as a university professor, if you file your own separate taxes, so if Cal Performances, say, is part of the UC system, if your taxes and your finances appear on the Regents of UC Berkeley, then probably not, because there's no way that is going to qualify under most of the individual, UC Berkeley is not going to have an appropriate NTE or NAICS code. If, however, you are on a university campus or part of the university system, but your individual organization files its own 990, then yes, you probably can. That's not an absolute. If you want to shoot me the individual details, we can look at it in more detail. How many times can I say detail? We are a nonprofit museum, arts and culture center, and have dinner, plays, and cultural events. Dwayne, if you have the mere fact that you're a museum does not disqualify you. Within your museum, you have to have a appropriate venue, and you have to meet the other criteria. But yes, as you say, you will email me. Let's get the two new ones at the bottom. I work with an organization that screens films. We do not have our own venue space, and we'll have additional follow-up questions. I'll send you an email. There you go. Okay, it's 12:05. I'm sorry, I should let you all go. Is there anyone who is still on the line that has a question that hasn't been answered? If you want to hang, I can hang for another 10 minutes, but let's just go to the Q&A. If you have a question still, put them over in the Q&A instead of the chat. The Q&A is so much easier to deal with. And as I say, I can stay until 12:15. Thank you, all of you who came and who are still here. We will give you this information as a follow-up. My other recommendation to you is we are going to continue to do webinars until the program closes. I know this is the holidays and a crazy time of season. If you want, come back to one of the webinars that we'll have after the first of the year, when some of the things that I've had to say today, I'm not sure of, will be clarified. Good luck. Err on the side of applying. Don't sit on hold with the call center for 4 hours. Send me an email. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next adventure. Okay, I'm going to answer a few more of these for those of you who want to hang. Back in July, we actually managed. Okay. You can't get another grant, Stephanie Atkinson. If you applied for the California Nonprofit Grant in July and got that, that's great. The Cal Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant that opened in July and is still ongoing is not related to this grant. They're both administered by Lindustry, but they have no overlap. You can receive both. If you're a not-for-profit on this call whose budget is less than $2 million, and you haven't applied for the Cal Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant, do. This was the award agreement. No, you can't. Again, Stephanie, you can't. There is not a problem with getting a venues grant if you have a nonprofit performing arts grant. We applied for a California Relief Grant, but your application didn't go through, and we don't know what it's. Okay, so the California Relief Grant is separate. If getting a California Relief Grant, applying for a California Relief Grant does not preclude you from applying for the venues grant. You're totally fine. Shoot me an email and we may be able to figure out what went on with your California Relief Grant. There are some of the California Relief Grants that never got funded, I believe, because of lack of funding. Not the venues, but the relief. Please repeat the eligibility for qualified venues. Basically, Eddie, I don't know if you can jump back to that page when you have to have a defined audience space and a defined performance space. You have to have a light rig, a sound mixer, and a PA system. And then you have to have at least 2 functions off of the list there. It can be one person performing the functions, but you have to have a stage manager, a box office person, a security person, a booker, there we go, a promoter, a sound engineer. See, I remembered all of them. You have to have at least one person that does at least 2 of those jobs. As an arts council, we use public spaces for performances, art walks, and we always pay. Jeanette, as long as your NTEE or NAICS appears on the list of eligible, then yes, I don't see anything, and you have performances that you charge for, and you pay your performers, then yes, you absolutely can apply. Like I say, the arts councils fall under a few different, I don't know who Molly Clark is, so I can't give you her contact information, Nancy. Arts councils sometimes have different NTEEs. So that's what you want to look at, is go into GuideStar and see how you're listed. Read the California Earned Income Requirement. What about touring income for presenters outside of California? that still count as California-based earnings. Janine, send me an email. I think you should be fine as long as the company itself is based in. So in other words, you're listed with the California Secretary of State. You should be fine. And the preponderance of your income has to be earned in California. So if you tour in California and some other places, then you'll probably be okay. If you are based in California, but all of your touring is out of the state, then you probably won't. Understandably, the state wants state tax dollars to be spent within the state. Okay. Look at that. I think we did it. I think we answered every question. I've said my email to email me 47 times. Thank you again, all of you. Go and have a lovely Tuesday. Please do read over all the requirements. Check back to our website. If you sign up for the California Californians for the Arts email blasts, we send out regular blasts with updates and changes as this happens. One of the great things about all of us in the cultural economy being members of things like Californians for the Arts, Californians Arts Advocates, is it's a great communication tool. When things happen and we need to advocate, or there's information we want to get to the full industry, if we're all part of the same group, it's easy to contact all of you. Okay, that's my last pitch. Have fun. Thank you. And I'm sure I'll talk to many of you soon. Bye. Eddie, can you make sure that you save the chat?